So, I'm going to make a prediction for the future, which is, if you're in outsourcing relationships right now, they will not be as successful as you hope them to be. Here's the worst news. What could really happen, which will really piss you off, is that they might actually fail altogether, and there's bugger all that you can probably do about that. So the good news is, I'm qualified, I think, after 3 years of research on this particular phenomenon, to tell you, A, why I think that's happening in most instances, and B, how you can fix it. So, let's start with how I got into this crazy position and how I ended up being here. So, about 7 years ago, I fell into outsourcing by accident, and I'm not quite sure how. I think it's got something to do with Alex Yule, who's standing around here somewhere. Can you not hear me? Shall I shout louder?
That's fine.
Thank you, Alex. So Alex employed me about 7 years ago to manage some ITO and BPO outsourcing relationships. And I was quite a perfectionist, and I still am. And I was quite into my theory, and I still am. And I have a real problem saying no, which is why I'm here tonight. Exactly the same reason as why I ended up doing a master's. I got really upset by the fact that I couldn't deliver these really perfect outsourcing relationships. Some of them were great, some of them weren't so great, and I got really uptight about the fact that I couldn't fix them, and I was Superwoman, and why was that? So I set out on a journey to go and find the answer to these things, and that was 3 years ago on the start of a research program. Some people, lovely people, before I forget to say it, helped me with some of that research, and they're here tonight, sort of dotted around. So thank you, you know who you are, and I'm very grateful to all of you for that. So, keeping on the clock, God, where did I start? I started talking to all these lovely people, and I asked them one single question. I just started with one question, which was, tell me about your experience of outsourcing. Why do you think it fails? Why do you think it's successful? And about 1,000 hours later of interviews and deep diving, I found just a handful of key themes, which derive from 998 interesting bits of information that I'd gathered along the way, and my thousands of mind maps and all sorts of complicated coding and stuff that I'd done. So I found these handful of themes, and I'm going to tell you what they are, and then they translate into, believe it or not, just 2 things that mean our outsourcing relationships are either successful or failure. So yeah, 2 things, which is a bit crazy. So it's going to blow your mind, peeps. And the other thing I want to do is just to explain to you that I think the reason that we miss the bloody point on all of this all the time is that we forget to think about subtle things, and that we're kind of out here distracted by all the stuff. And there's a guy called David Bohm who wrote a book for me who was seminal in all this, and he wrote a book called On Dialogue, and I've mentioned it to you. Go find it, because it is teensy weensy. It'll take 3 weeks to read it, and it'll make your ears bleed with your brains, but it is just phenomenal. And in that book he talks about the lights of Las Vegas and this distraction that we have, which is just all-consuming and fills our consciousness, and means that we can't see the subtle things. The really important things are right in front of our noses, and the 2 things I'm going to tell you are right in front of your noses, and you will not believe it. So I wanted to kind of alert you to the fact that there's some really subtle things that we miss regularly. And I was there at the start of my outsourcing research. Somebody said, we're going to do reflection. I said, pass me a bloody mirror. And now I'm really reflective, and I like to do this stuff all the time. So I would recommend you go and look for that quotation and a bit more on just being a bit more subtle about things. So the handful of things that I found in my outsourcing research related to, 1, human nature. Things happen in outsourcing relationships because of the people that are involved in them. It's human nature to react that way in a situation because it's pressurised, that's the way we pay them, their marriage is falling apart, their kids are pissing them off, whatever. So it's human nature, and that was one main thing that came through. Another main thing that came through was the type of relationships that we have in outsourcing. So people were talking about it being like marriage, or parent and child type relationships. And that had its own effect, you know, suppliers and clients acting either as parent and children, and that kind of whole stroppy teenagers don't get what you're saying type thing going on. So there was a theme there. There was also a theme about leadership. And this really interested me. People were talking about where they'd seen successful outsourcing done really well. There was always a maverick, a rule breaker, somebody very odd, somebody that did weird stuff and made odd decisions, was really brave, and just told management to go away when they were making daft decisions when it came to outsourcing. And also, there was the kind of relationships that people were having, so the framework around the relationships, the commercial or the contractual type of relationships, or even the personal ones, you know, where you hit it off with somebody, and that's great, because then you can have that conversation and it's fine, great. But that's all a bit random, and that all happens by accident. What I found, taking a massive leap forward, about 6 months, and all my hours and hours of sitting on the floor with about 1,000 post-it notes was the way that I ended up doing it. Taking a massive leap forward, I found that there were just 2 things that everything everybody had told me related to. And that's the end of my presentation. Do you want to know more? Because I'm reveling in this. 3 years and I'm reveling in it. So 2 things. The first thing is that organisations are made up of things called memes. Now, Eleanor's related to this. Some of you have said that you might know what it is. Memes is a term coined by Richard Dawkins in about the 70s for a thing, a parcel of information or culture that kind of spreads between people. It's the stuff that makes us kind of work in an organisation and go dressed to work a certain way. It's fashion trends, you know. I was born in the 80s, it's Levi's and leg warmers and that kind of thing. So it's the small parcels of culture that we really don't ever see. It's just why we do stuff, and it's why we do stuff in firms. So organisations are made up of these groups of memes. They're not the faceless cultures that those bigwigs at the top would have us believe. They're not their mission statements, values, and those kind of things. They are these things, these tiny, subtle little things that we miss because we're so tied up in our own objectivity. So the first thing I found was that these organisations that are made up of these memes are actually working in kind of a tribal-like way. So our organisations could be tribes. We could liken them to that. Tribes are a common set of people led by a common leader. Right? So in outsourcing, you take one tribe with its own set of goals and requirements, you take another, and you expect them to work together. That ain't ever going to happen, I'm afraid. The second thing that happens, and I'm going to tell you about, is that unless you have a leader and you have that leadership quality who can create this single tribe, or at least an environment of it, and then is blooming strong enough and maverick enough and brave enough, quite frankly, to manage that single tribe, you're outsourcing stuff, but you're onto a hiding something. So, what I want to say in the last kind of few minutes is, memes, I think, for me, are a rather kind of theoretical view of what is bloody obvious to all of us, or should be. Should be all written in front of you on the face of it. People act in certain ways because they have human nature, because they're copying culture. Humans are the only creatures on this planet that imitate, actually, culture. So lots of other imitation going on, but only humans do imitation of culture. That's why we're unique and lovely and wonderful. And the last thing I wanted to do was to re-predict the future for you. If we can apply this logic of a single tribe, if we can be sensible enough to recruit really good, I'm going to say shit hot, it's going to be on the video, I'm sorry. If we can recruit, okay, good. If we can recruit shit hot leaders to manage this and to deal with these memes, we might just stand a chance of not only having successful outsourcing, but actually achieving more than the sum of the parts, which we can sometimes do. I've seen it. It's happened by accident, but I've seen it, and it's out there, and it's quite bloody exciting. And the last thing I wanted to do in my last kind of, what must be a minute, is to share with you something around trying to send you away with a vision of looking at this subtlety. And it's a statement by my favourite author, Carl Jung, and he says that our own thought is our only treasure and our greatest treasure. And I want you to all remember that, if nothing else. That's it!